Fam, when we were in Nicaragua, right? There were these bomb-ass tacos that we had, right? When we had the event, when we went to the center where we were supposed to meet the defense minister who never showed up, but we were all dressed up. It's where me, you, Camilla, and Glory took that picture. We were all in blue. I was looking the swankiest, but y'all, you guys look good with me. But anyways, we had this awesome meal of braised meats and chickens and other rice and beans and great tortillas. It reminded me of a wedding I went to in Mexico City, man, where the food was awesome. And at late night when you were buzzed and you're drunk, all of a sudden they started rolling out the tacos. Fam, that man is with us today.
Hey, Alex. Welcome.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Alex Rubinstein is here. I was talking about the tacos at the wedding.
I know. So I just have one question. Who is Vivek?
Vivek Ramaswamy. He's a guy running for president, pretty much. He's just a conservative, populist right guy that's, was around, showed up on Fox, talked about, Bitcoin, blasted BlackRock and all these other ESG conveyors. And so now he's just running for president and he's trying to run. He's actually passed DeSantis in some polls as the second choice. People feel he's genuine and speaks from the heart, and he's a smart guy. So there's some people he's kind of building some momentum for the election. And, I want to go have a conversation with him. He did say something the other day that would really got a lot of people's eyes turning. He did say he doesn't believe the narrative on 9/11, and we'd like to have an independent investigation on what went on. So that kind of raised some eyebrows, Alex, and that's Vivek.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, DeSantis is like, I had so much hope that I placed into the populist right, as we call it, just seeing how they have been leading the charge as opposed to the left on Ukraine, for example. And then a guy like DeSantis comes around who's, apex bitch boy. I did a story maybe like a couple weeks ago about how he had once introduced legislation while having a seat in the House Foreign Affairs Committee to put boycotters of Israel or anybody who furnishes information that's used in a boycott against Israel in prison for 10 years. And so, I mean, if this is supposed to be a movement that is pro-free speech and, against these kind of, foreign entanglements, which suck up huge sums of taxpayer dollars, America first, right? And so to see so many people coalesce around him, it was very disappointing, but it seems that didn't last very long. It seems like he's going down in the polls and having to lay off a lot of his staffers. So that's good.
Yeah. He's a lot of people think that he's going to try to, and he had an ad out there where he tried to, out culture war Donald Trump when it came to gay people, whatnot. They were having.
I saw that. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So that was his angle. It's not going to work.
Well, yeah, and I think that part of Trump's appeal is that he is kind of like a liberal, right? I mean, this is a controversial point that I've made, and many people who I agree with on many issues have disagreed with me, but I really do think that Trump is a liberal. I mean, with the exception of a few things, but like economically, culture. I mean, he's from New York City, right? And the other day I was listening to "Genocide and Juice" by Boots Riley, and he had a song. This is like '92 or something, right? Early '90s, and he had a song where him and a couple of other rappers were impersonating people like J.P. Morgan and Getty. These very wealthy people, impersonating them as they are rapping. And Donald Trump comes up. He's got the last verse. And they're like, oh, here he comes. Oh, let's pretend we don't see him. So he was never accepted in that elite society. But he was very much part of that milieu in New York City of wealthy liberals, and it's not surprising to see that he's allowed for transgender people to participate in Miss Universe, for example. I just think that him being a moderate is actually part of his appeal.
Yeah.
I didn't think he was in charge of that anymore. He's still in charge of the Miss Universe?
I don't know. I haven't done any like actual research on this.
Okay.
I just saw that DeSantis's team was hammering him for over that. Yeah.
Saying that,
He used to be in
transgender
charge.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, God, if we get into that debate, we'll never get out of here. But that's a whole other debate. But yeah, no,
It's not what I'm here for, is it?
Way to go, Alex.
I know that we all agree on that, probably. But I brought you on here because of this article that you and Kit Clarenberg wrote for the Gray Zone. But before I get into it, Jamie, if you can just show this tweet of Bola Ahmed Tinubu meeting with the head of state and important dignitaries of President Emmanuel Macron, France. Now, this issue I've been covering a lot on RT. The election of the president of Nigeria, and of course, thereafter, his demand of intervention in Niger and ECOWAS and who they are. In basically, they are supposed to be a united organization. It's the Economic Community of West African States, and they're supposed to be this united organization that is fighting on behalf of West African states. But we all know that it was created, and Alex, you can go into that. It's essentially, show them while I'm talking. It's essentially a front that is advocating for the interests of France and Europe and the United States in Africa. And as we saw from the Russia-Africa summit, the conversation has been no more neocolonialism. Burkina Faso and Mali before also had sanctions placed against them by Nigeria, and they're fighting, and ECOWAS as well, and they're fighting against this sort of neocolonialist mindset. And I think that whole situation really came into fruition, of course, with the coup in Niger. And what we're seeing as a result of that, we're seeing this sort of formation of West African militant governments against the chosen governments of the United States. So you wrote an article talking about the history of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and the article goes into depth on the background of this man and where he came from. So just to point out to the audience, he's not only the president of Nigeria, but he's also the chairman of ECOWAS. So that's an important thing to mention. So Alex, what are the overall points that you saw that you want to highlight in terms of his background and how he came to be so backed by U.S. interests from actually having this very well documented drug trafficking past?
Yeah, I would start by saying that it was not well documented until recently. It was basically rumors in Nigeria, but an African journalist by the name of David Hundeyin got these documents and he posted them online. And so he, really all the credit goes to him for exposing this. But yeah, I mean, so Bola Tinubu, I identified 3 nicknames of his in my article in Nigeria: Mother of the Market, the Godfather of Lagos, and I forget the last one. But I've since learned a new one from the Nigerians on Twitter that have been just so grateful for this piece, and they call him T-Bola. So I thought that's kind of funny. Yeah, little's really known about this guy. We're not sure if Bola Tinubu is his actual birth name. There's uncertainty around his age and just about every fact of his life prior to him showing up in Chicago on a student visa. And in fact, he's been said to have lied about his educational background, but after graduating, he started working for some major U.S.-based multinational corporations, including Mobil Oil Nigeria, including Deloitte, which is one of the big four accounting firm. Advertising firms. And what was the last one? Well, it doesn't matter. The point is that he was only making about $2,400 a month, yet somehow he was depositing millions of dollars into his personal bank accounts. And so the question is where did that money come from? Well, according to a U.S. court in Illinois, that money came from laundering drugs on behalf of his heroin dealing cousin. It was laundering drug money on behalf of his cousin. So he had a good portion of his assets seized. Originally, it was more than $1 million that was seized. However, the U.S. government only claimed like $460,000. And again, this is early 80s, so adjust for inflation, it's much higher. But the question is why was he able to keep the remaining portion of the initially seized money? Why was he never indicted? The affidavit states very clearly the results of this joint IRS FBI investigation showing how he laundered this money, how he set up shell companies, how he was working hand in glove with two men in particular who were leading the Chicago heroin gang. And it's not in dispute that he did that. So I've seen people say allegedly. No, it's not allegedly. It's there. But he was not indicted, and he was able to keep a good portion of the money. So investigation ramps up. He goes back to Nigeria, and that's when he launches his political career. So seems a lot like he took this drug money and used it to seed his political career. Over the course of the years, he's been senator from Lagos, governor of Lagos, and very much viewed as a kingmaker in Nigerian politics. There was one report by DW, the German state broadcaster, which pointed out that every candidate that he has backed has won. So, I mean, and again, you don't get names like Mother of the Market for no reason. So over the course of his political career, he developed a very close working relationship with the United States Embassy in Nigeria. We know this because of leaked classified cables released by WikiLeaks, which showed him frequently briefing, I reviewed them, frequently briefing American officials on the political situation in Nigeria. American officials saying that, well, you know, he's known to embellish what's the term they use? He plays fast and loose with the facts, but we find him very helpful and his insights very helpful. So this was the essence of his relationship with the Americans, as far as we know from those cables, was frequent briefings on the political situation in Nigeria. As all this is happening, as his power, his influence is becoming more and more prominent, and he's cultivating a stronger and stronger relationship with the U.S., he's also managing to weather these insane corruption scandals just over and over again. For example, at one point, he was under investigation for operating 16 foreign bank accounts. He was embarrassed while at a hearing for that investigation when he was photographed at the dock. So the next time he went, he refused to take his place. There was a British investigation into him, and the Nigerian government started refusing to send Britain the documents that they needed to prosecute this investigation. So to prosecute the investigation. So he's, I mean, and then in 2019, you know, there was this incident where two armored trucks filled with cash, allegedly, were photographed at his residence. And he basically said, I keep my money wherever it is. Nigerians believe that he was buying votes with it. And he said, if I want to give it to the public, I give it to the public. Couple years later, they changed their story and basically said that the armored trucks had gone down the wrong path. So highly unbelievable, highly suspicious. But anyways, this is the guy that he tried to get the Nigerian Senate to authorize an invasion. The Nigerian Senate refused. Now he's working through ECOWAS, which is the Regional Economic and Security Alliance that he chairs, to have an invasion. And they are meeting tomorrow, Thursday, to discuss this invasion. He's been imposing sanctions, cutting off electricity. So he's really the point man for this anti-Niger operation. And he's the perfect imperial puppet to do this, because the U.S. and France are able to exert leverage on him. They have all this dirt, and this is what, as you guys know, knowing the history of Honduras, this is what they do. They find these people who are totally compromised, and they are able to control them. And the moment that they're no longer useful, they're discarded. So that's basically the investigation.
The election system in Nigeria too is way out of whack. There was, well, before the election was going on, there was somebody who contacted me and they wanted me to go to Nigeria to observe. I never got a chance to go, but they also want me to put together a plan on how they can have fair elections over there, because they said, and as they were describing this stuff to me, it almost felt like, oh, this feels like an American election over here. So they had the mechanisms in which they wanted to put the people in power, in power. And guess who showed up there to observe their elections? And now we know that they're Fugazi. Stacey Abrams. Just telling everybody. The election system. Yeah, Stacey Abrams showed up. Remember that, fam? She was there. Stacey Abrams is observing the elections. I'm like, okay, those are fair elections. Not. So I mean, this is why I'm so passionate about this subject, Alex. Like, people think, well, Pasta, you're a little bit nuts about this thing. But yeah, this is the mechanism of control over here. If you can have a system where people are selected and not elected, then you have complete control. That's why I also believe that I will never, vacate or move away from voting and stuff too as well, because I'm going to make sure that they will take my vote. They have to pry my vote out of my dead hands, and as they cheat, I will call them on it. And that's what I think we need. I don't know if that's the right solution, but that's the why I think elections are so important. Look what's going on in Nigeria today. They had a Fugazi.
Well, and I'll tell you, I don't know anything about election integrity. I don't know anything about Nigerian elections. I do know that the U.S. government was following them very closely, because I've reviewed a number of the Discord leaks, and they were frequently talking about the Nigerian elections. But what I will say is that since doing this article, it's gone pretty viral in Nigeria. And I've had a lot of Nigerians tweeting at me saying, he's not our president, he stole the election. So I do think that it's quite likely that there's a story there.
Yeah. It was
they've been saying this. They've been saying this the whole time, that the elections were not fair. And it was hard for any of us outside of Nigeria to discern, because even when we had people on, I guess working at RT, we had different people on. There were some that were, oh, yes, the elections were fair. There were some that were, no, they weren't. And like, you have to really know the intricacies of the politics of Nigeria. And it's just so complex that it was just like, in covering the election, most people just have no idea unless you live there and unless you really get down to investigating it. So I definitely believe that, based on you could just look at his whole rap that he has, and also he's backed by the IMF and the World Bank when he ran. So that was another thing you pointed out in your article as well. And it's kind of crazy to me that all of this is happening. But I want to talk a little bit about Niger, and like how that is an important point when it comes to this idea of pushback against the neocolonialism of France, because as a lot of both of you probably know, Niger is the reason why France has power. Most of their population, I think 80% was the statistic, does not have power, yet they're supplying power to the vast majority of the population in France. And they're also supplying uranium. Without this uranium, France would definitely be in the gutter. And so what we're looking at here in terms of Niger as a country that's pushing back, I don't know if you have any opinion on what you think this is going to happen tomorrow, because not only is Nigeria leading this charge via ECOWAS, but there are also other countries that have more pro-Western governments that are saying, okay, well, we will be forced to then send our men there as a military intervention. 25,000 or so, I've heard. That's a small number. But when we're talking about Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, these governments are militant. They are extremely anti-West in terms of, who's leading them. We have the Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso, who many are saying is like the reincarnation of Thomas Sankara. We have, a lot of these figures that have been talking about multipolarity, talking about pushing back against the West in Africa. What do you think could potentially happen, and how big do you think this conflict could get in terms of Africa and perhaps in terms of the greater world right now?
Yeah, well, I don't have a crystal ball, and I typically try to refrain from speculation. With that said, you have in Guinea, you have in Mali, you have in Burkina Faso, and now in Niger, you have anti-colonial pro-Western governments, and I believe the Central African Republic is also they have not had a coup recently, but they are more favorable to Russia, and so you have a region that's being kind of split up under spheres of influence. And I actually have another piece coming on the gray zone soon that talks more about this. But with ECOWAS being backed by the West, and then this kind of anti-colonial bloc that's emerging, we're running the risk of a region-wide proxy war between the United States and Russia again, because a lot of these governments have security agreements with Wagner. They prefer Wagner being there over Americans or French or Spanish or whoever. So, and again, this is an area that is mineral rich. So it's important for the future of both Western or Russian or Chinese economies. And so it is very much a point of strategic interest for all sides. I tend to think that this is in many ways more dangerous than Ukraine, because Ukraine shares a border with NATO, and Russia knows that it cannot violate that border. And they haven't. The only time that border was violated, it was by Zelensky, who blamed Russia, but that turned out not to be true. There was the AP piece, but I don't want to go into that rabbit hole. But so there were rules that governed that conflict. Russia didn't go in and do shock and awe. They understood that this needed to be contained. In Western Africa, my fear is that those rules won't exist, and already we have NATO in a situation where much of its stocks are depleted. It's being embarrassed daily by Russia and Ukraine, and it's very much a wounded dog trapped in the corner. And so, what will it resort to? Will they try to do? And you look at what's still happening in Libya. Just today it was announced 42 migrants died off the Libyan coast. This is a direct result of the killing of Muammar Gaddafi and the toppling of that government. And you have still slavery in Libya. And so, what's at risk here, in my view, actually brings us very close to World War III territory. Even more so in many ways. It compounds the issue of Ukraine in that context, because it has the potential to turn into a region-wide proxy war over large swaths of the continent. So that's the fear, and I hope that cooler heads prevail. And obviously that ECOWAS does not invade and allows these people the right of self-determination.
Yeah, and we have the BRICS summit coming up in the 22nd of August through the 24th. That's going to be huge. Putin is not going, so that's also part of the whole situation. He's trying to avoid any issue, so he's sending Lavrov instead. So that's going to be huge, because the Russia-Africa summit really gave the microphone to a lot of African leaders. And they all, it was almost like you would think they got together in a room and decided to say the same things, but they didn't. They just all have been. You mentioned Libya. One of the representatives from Libya talked about, what the United States did to Libya and how they want Russia's help, literally asking for Russia's help in ousting foreign interventions and foreigners from their country. And of course, they also asked for the help of other countries in Africa. And then on top of that, you mentioned Wagner, and Wagner was already in Niger. They've established sort of contingent in the capital. And so that also says a lot. And that, of course, I'm not going to go into the whole Prigozhin thing, but that also leads you to also think what happened here regarding Prigozhin comes out very interesting when you talk about where Wagner was sent. So I do hope that cooler heads prevail, but I do agree with you that this is a conflict that could get much, much bigger. And I do think this is a conflict where we're going to see a lot of alliances really start to show. And I think Africans are more united than ever in a lot of ways, even if it doesn't seem that way right now, because every interview I had with somebody from Africa, and the media that's coming out of Africa, and the media that is just coming out is extremely much like, we want our national sovereignty, we want to regain the autonomy of our economy and our decision making, and that's pretty much what it's centered around. So I think this article probably struck a chord with a lot of people in Niger who knew this man was corrupt, but to get it put out into a wide audience was really, really good. So great job for both of you for writing the article and for doing the work to string together all this information, because it's just Africa is not a continent that I think a lot of media in general have covered enough. And I say this,
and myself included.
Media. Yeah, I include myself in this as well. And so I think that finally we're seeing this push for that, and I think that's great. So Alex, anything else you want to say about the article or about what's going on with you and the gray zone, what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So again, I do have another story on Western Africa coming on the gray zone. Just a few days ago, we launched a fundraiser to grant Kit Clarenberg, one of the best journalists out there, Wyatt Reed, one of the best journalists out there, and myself, full-time positions at the gray zone, so that we can put out more of the kind of things that, I think gray zone readers have become accustomed to: high quality investigative journalism that just dismantles the worst states narratives and exposes massive schemes, self-serving schemes of Western elites to line their pockets at the expense of human lives. So if you have read the gray zone, benefited from the gray zone, consider contributing to our fundraiser. It's on GoFundMe, and get me a job, but no, Fiorella, I want to thank you for giving me this chance to talk about the article and the fundraiser, and love what you're doing as always.
Oh, thank you, Alex, for taking the time and coming on and talking, and thank you for doing the work no matter what. So I hope you guys reach your goal, and I hope you get a job. I thought you already had one, but maybe
I'm freelance. I'm freelance. I only contribute to the gray zone because it's like, why would I want to contribute anywhere else? I really think that the gray zone is the best. So I know a lot of people agree with me. So I appreciate again the opportunity.
Thank you, and good luck to you and whatever's next. Looking forward to the next article.
Thanks. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.